Hello student. In this lecture, we are going to discuss one of the very important topic in programming C, that is structure and union. So, so far in array and the string, we have seen that it can be used to store the data element. Is mean more than one data element, but all the data elements should be homogeneous type. Like suppose if you want to store the 10 number of data elements which are integer in natures, we can declare an array which is then integer type. Like integers, let's have a 10. Similarly, when we need to store suppose 10 number of data element which are the floating type, so we can declare the array with have the floating type data type. So let's have b with have the size is 10. So here a is an array which is capable to store the 10 number of data elements which are integer in natures, whereas the b is a array which is basically stored the 10 number of data elements which are in floating in nature. Similarly, in the case of the string, suppose if you want to store some data element which is the composite of a set of finite characters, so we can use a character array which is basically called as a string, and we can define that kind of the string as a characters with have, let's have c with the size is 10. It specify the c is a string who can hold a string which is composite of the total 9 number of character, because the last character is end with the null character. So it is basically capable to store the 10 character, out of which 9 will be character and 1 character will be end of the string. So here we have deal with various example, we have deal with the various problems where we have seen that we can store the finite set of the data element which are homogeneous type, which are similar in nature. But in real time we will face a various situations where we may need to store the data element always not homogeneous. Like suppose I want to store a record about a student that consists that name, they consist serial number, they consist some marks or average of marks. So in that case, what we have noticed, that if you want to store the name of an student, so definitely it will be the string type. If you want to store the serial number of the student, definitely it will be integer type. Similarly, if you want to store the marks or the CGP of some of the student, definitely it will comes as a floating type. So here we'll have to, if you need to store some kind of the record or some kind of the data where the all the data are not in similar in nature, so we need another kind of the tools to tackle these problems. So this is the structure and union who can solve this problem. So structure and the union is a special data structure or a special type of the tools that is provided in C, which is basically used to store the finite set of the data element which are in heterogeneous form. So as per the definition is concerned, if you write the definitions, so you may write like a structure. First of all, we define the structures, then we will discuss about the union. I will let you know how the union is differ from the structure. So basically structure and union both are the similar type, because that can be used both for store the data which are the heterogeneous type, but they have some simple difference, a small basic difference. What is the actual difference between structure and union? I'll let you know. So let's have, as per the structure is concerned, what is the actual definition? So we may define a structure by defining a structure is a user defined data type, where we have seen that array is a derived data type, whereas the structure is user defined data type. As we have already specified that there have a three kind of the data type. One is basic or fundamental data type, the like integer, float, character comes under that category. Or you may have derived user defined data type, or derived data like pointer, array comes under the derived data type, whereas the structures comes under the another kind of the data that is user defined. So a structure is a user defined data type which is generally used to store the finite number of data element that may be heterogeneous form. Clear? So far in array or string, basically it is capable to store the finite set of the data element which are homogeneous in nature, but whereas the structure and union is basically stored the finite number of the data element which are in heterogeneous form. So if you talk about the array and the structure, the difference between array and structure is nothing but the array is a derived data type, whereas the structure is a user defined data type, and array is used to store the homogeneous data elements, whereas the structure is the heterogeneous type of the data elements. Now once we talk about a structure, so how can you declare a structure? So let's have declaration of structure variable. How can you declare the structure variable? So if you talk about the structure variable, if you want to use the structure variable, so you'll have to keep in your mind only four things. That is, the first point it says the structure is always start with the keyword start. So the keyword start with struct. So whenever we want to use structures, we'll have to use this keyword struct. Second says after defining the structure, there should have a structure tag name, means structure name. What is the name of that structures? That is the structure tag name. Third, how many variables that is going to be stored? That is the list of variables. And fourth point, it says it must be end with semicolon. So it must be terminating or termination with semicolon. So these are the four things you should have to keep in your mind once you want to use the structure. So let's define his syntax. Based on these four rules, we can define the syntax. So first says the struct. So every structure, it must start with the keyword structs. All are in the small letters. As such, we know that C is a case sensitive language. So there have a struct followed by the structure tag name. So let's have there should have some name. Then you'll have to define the list of variables, and list of variables must have to define inside this braces. So let's have I wants to define some of the structures which may consist some set of data elements which may or may not be same, means maybe homogeneous, maybe heterogeneous. So here we'll have to define the first data item what we want to store. So first one, it will be the first data type 1 with have some variable which wants to store. For next data type, so data type 2, define the another variable, let's say variable 2. Similarly, as many number of the data type you wants to store it, you may define data type n. Let's have variable n. And every semicolon, every structures must be end with this semicolon. So this is the way that we can declare a structure. So this is basically a structure, but whenever we wants to access this variable or all the data that is you have defined inside the structures, you need some attributes. So to define the attributes, you will have to specify, let's have struct name, let's say x. So as such, to whenever we wants to store some values, we need some variable. Similarly, in the case of the structure, it's just define the your user. As such, it is a user defined data type, user defined right, like data type. You see, I have defined these structures which can going to store this n number of the data elements which are n number of data type, and whenever we want to store this value against all these data type which is defined inside the structures, we need some attributes, we need some variable, and the variable definitely should be the similar type of this defined structure. So what the structures we have defined? We have defined the struct name. Name is the name of the structure, so we'll have to define as a struct name and the variable by which we can access these variables. So this way basically the structure works. So structures as is very important, going to play a very important role in the field of the computer science, because in the next semesters where you are going to have the data structures or algorithm design and analysis, and you are going to have so many other forthcoming subjects where you need these structures, you need this kind of tools which is to solve your problems. So the structures is a user defined data type which is generally used to store the finite number of the data element which is maybe heterogeneous form. Okay, so let's have some example by which it will be much clear to you. So here I am going to discuss two simple example tools of the structures. So let's have the first problem which has been given. Write a program to store the name, roll number and marks of the three different students and display the same. So here here we will generally notice that we have been asked to store the name, roll number and marks of three different students. So every student would have the name, every student will have the roll number, every student will have the marks. So against every student we are going to store these three records, and all the records are not the similar type. Like the name definitely will be the string because it is the set of the characters. Roll number or the serial number, definitely it should be the integer type, and the marks basically it is always going to be the marks or CGPA, it is going to be a floating type. So here we need to store these three number of the data elements of all the individual students which are not the same. So what we need the structure. So as the normal variables we can declare as a local or the globally. So let's have in the structure also that can be declared, can be defined as a local way or the global way. Let's have it defined as a global way. Let's have here we need how many variables? Three number of variables for all the individual students. So let's have we'll have to declare a structure struct. We need to define the name. So here we're going to store the record about the students now. So let's have the name of that structure is student. Okay, open braces. How many data element will have to specify? Three data element: name, roll number and marks. So what the name, what should be the data type? Definitely it should be the character type, means string. So let's have characters, specify the name, and let's have the size is 50. Similarly, if we talk about the roll number, let's have integers. Here we are going to mention all roll number like 5, 10, 3 like that. So we are going to store the roll number which is must be in integer in nature. So let's have integer roll number, and lastly is marks. So marks definitely it will marks like CGPA I mean to say. So it may become 7.3, 5.9 like that. So it will have the float. Let's have marks. Is it okay? And it is end with semicolon. So far we have declared that what is the shape of the structure. So the structures are going to have this going to store the record of the all the three individual student, and every student would have these three different data type. There should have the name, there should be roll number, there should be the marks. So these are the structures we have defined, but we have not defined any variables name yet. So as many number of the record that you want to store, you will have to declare that many number of variables. And what is the data type of the variable? Definitely it should be the structure type. So let's have main. Here what we need to store the records about name, roll number, marks of three individual students. So we'll have to use the three variables. So struct student. Let's have A is the first student, B is the second student, C is the third student. Okay. So here we will have to enter the name of roll number marks of all the individual students. So you may display the message like printf enter the name, roll number and marks of first student. That's a first student. So how can we do so? So definitely to read the data, let's have to the name is a character, is a string. Definitely there should have the first name and last name. So scanf is not being useful. So instead of scanf, we may use the gets. So let's have gets about what? We have to store the A is the first student. So A of which variable? Name. So we'll have to specify A dot name. So whenever we want to access the variable, we'll have to use this dot operator. So variable A dot which of the data type we want to access? Name. So this is the name of the student. And next, to get the rest of the inputs, we'll have to take the roll number, which is integer nature, so percent %d. We'll have to take the marks, it is a floating type, so percent %f. So here we'll have to specify a dot roll number. Similarly, a dot, sorry, should have ampersand, a dot marks. Is this fine? So here so far we have asked the marks about the first student. We have name, roll number and marks. Similarly, we may ask about the second student. We may ask about the third student. This is going to be copied. So once the for accessing the name, taking the name, roll number, marks of the second student, instead of a dot name, here we'll have to specify b dot name. Similarly, to get the roll number for the second, there should be b dot roll number, and for marks there should be b dot marks. Similarly, for the third student, there should have c dot name, c dot roll number, c dot marks. So in this fashions, we can easily get it the marks, the details about all the three students. So once we'll have the records about all these three students, if you need to display the same, as such we know that we can use the printf for displaying the individual variable. So here we may write printf the records of, let's have first student. So what are the records? So you may specify, give the space equals to, you may give like percent s for display the string, or you may mean the puts also, that is choice is yours. Then for display the your roll number, percent %d. For displaying your marks, let's have percent %f. So here we may mention for first student. So first student we have used the variable a now. So a dot name, it will display the name of the first student. A dot roll number, so it will display the roll number of the first student. And a dot marks, it will display the marks of the first student. Similarly fashions, we can display the marks of second student as well as third student, and it will be in with get ch and close braces. So this is the simplest example to use your structure. So whenever you will face any situation or any problems where you may ask to store the data element of against all the individual students or any individual entity, so and if all the data elements are the heterogeneous form, you will have to use the structure. Here for individual entity like the student, will have to store the records about the name, role and marks, and all are in the definitely not in the same type. We'll have to use the structure. Take another example. So here write a program to store the marks of math, physics, chemistry of two individual students and display the name of the student who got the highest mark. So here you might be noticed that the marks of math, physics, chemistry, definitely it will be the similar type. So here we have seen that all the data type are the similar or the heterogeneous form, different type. But here you have to store the marks of the three marks of math, physics, chemistry of the two individual students, and all the marks are also the similar type, because if you are going to store the marks of math and integer, so physics also should be integer, characters should also be the integer. So in that case, structure can also be used. So structures not only will be used for storing always the heterogeneous, even it is also used to store the homogeneous type of data type. So in here we may define a structure. Let's have the student as, oh, here we'll have to display the name now, so name also should be stored. So it should be the character type. Let's have name of all the individual students. Let's have size is 50. Let's have marks of maths, physics, chemistry na. So for maths, let's have M. For physics, let's have P. And let's have for the chemistry for this C. So MPC alls are in integer type. Close it and end with semicolon. So here we have defined the structure, the shape of the structure, or the say or record of the all the individual student. There should be the name of all the individual student. There should be the marks of mathematics, physics, and chemistry. So here we have defined the structure, but so far we have not defined how many number of the students we are going to store the record. So here inside the main, that is choice is yours, you can define the structures inside the main functions also, and for the making is most simplest, we have defined the structure in outside this main function, so it will be treated as a globally. So here we need to store the record about the two individual students. Na? So we need the two variables, which are which type of the structure type is the structure student. Let's have A, let's have B. It's fine. Now what we'll have to do, you'll have to display the name of that student who got the highest mark. So if you need to display the name only that student who got the highest mark, so here we'll have to find the sum of all the marks now. So sum of the marks of first student, next sum of all the marks of the second student. So let's say we need the two variables integer t1, the sum of the marks of first student, and let's have t2 for sum of the marks of the second student. So here we're going to use the two variables for taking the decision that which of the name is going to be displayed. So t1 and t2. So let's have here we are going to ask the user printf enter name and marks of physics, chemistry, math of first student. So what is going to have, the users are going to provide the values. So let's have to take the name, we may name some the gates. So let's have for the first student we are going to use the variable a, so there should be a dot name, and to take the rest of the inputs we'll have to use scanf, that will be %d for physics, maths for physics, for chemistry. So 3% d will be required, so it will be a dot m ampersand a dot p and a dot c. So dot operator basically used to access these data elements. So here the marks of the first record about the first student has been stored. Similarly, we must ask or we may store the record about the second student as well. So we may ask the user printf enter the name and marks of physics, chemistry, and mathematics of second student. So to take the input, as such we have used the gates for taking the name. So here for the taking the second student, let's say we're going to use the variable b. So it should be b dot name. Now to take the rest of the input, scanf %d, %d, and %d for b dot m ampersand b dot p ampersand b dot c. This is fine. Now once we'll have these two input, we'll have to display either the name of the first student or the second student. How? Based on the sum of all the marks about physics, chemistry, mathematics of the first student and the sum of the maths, physics, chemistry of the second student. If both, now we'll compare the sum of both the student, whoever is greater, their name will be displayed. So for finding the sum of all the marks of the first student and second student, we are going to use the two variable, that is the T1, which will be the nothing but sum of the marks of the first student. So a dot m plus a dot p plus a dot c. So it is the marks of the mathematics for the first student, physics marks for the first student, and chemistry marks for the first student. So it will sum of all. Similarly, for the T2, it would be b dot m plus b dot p plus b dot c. Now we will have the sum of both of the student, that is T1 and T2, and the display will be depends upon which is the greatest. So here we'll compare. If your T1 is greater than T2, so definitely whose name should be displayed? The student of the name of the first student should be displayed. So here you simply mention printf percent, sorry, here the s, or you may write puts also, choice is yours. Let's have puts a dot name, or else what should be? Puts p dot name. That's it. This is the things. Lastly, get ch and finished. This is the simplest program of your structure, that whenever we need to store the data element against every entity, and all the data elements are not the same, so you'll have to use the structures. Thank you for watching.